We've got a cure, a real one, and we're willing to negotiate with you to release it. But it's gonna happen here, on our soil. Follow the rules, and you'll be our honored guests. Today on the Comic Book Report, Undiscovered Country, Volume 1, Destiny. Stick around and check it out. Greetings all, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I finally dove into something on my to-read pile. That's right, we're taking a look at the first volume of Image Comics' Undiscovered Country. I'm a big fan of Snyder, and I knew that this was an interesting concept that I wanted to check out eventually, and I finally took the leap and bought the first volume. So why don't we go ahead and get started with today's review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written by Snyder and Charles Soule, and penciled by Giuseppe Camuncoli. The issues in this volume were published by Image Comics beginning in 2019. The volume itself collects Undiscovered Country issues 1 through 6, and finally, this standard-sized trade paperback comes in 176 pages. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and give a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the entirety of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first look at that trade paperback. This is Undiscovered Country Volume 1, Destiny. Some of you might note that this is not the traditional standard-sized trade paperback cover. That is because I got an exclusive Barnes & Noble special edition, so it has a different cover on it, and they even threw in a small little poster, which I'll show you in a moment. But as I go ahead and show you the spine, as well as the back cover of this trade paperback, I'll also include a quick picture of the regular trade paperback cover so you can get an idea if you buy a regular version. And there it is. I think both covers are nice, but hey, an exclusive edition, why not? And now that we've taken a look at the exteriors, I'll go ahead and show you the poster that came bundled along with this Barnes & Noble exclusive edition. It's a pretty small little poster, but it has the traditional trade paperback cover on it, and it's just a neat little throw-in that they had. This was the same price as the paperback itself, but like I said, Barnes & Noble had this little exclusive offer, so I went ahead and picked it up. Very cool, very cool. But anyway, this is a standard size trade, as I mentioned. The printed paper stock is a glossy print, which I always love to see. Otherwise, it's just, your run-of-the-mill trade paperback, nothing really to complain about. It is Image, so I think the quality overall is a little bit better on their trade paperbacks. I feel like the paper quality itself is maybe a little thicker. And overall, no real complaints. I think the book was really well constructed, and that's about all the notes I have on the edition itself. Now for the synopsis, the storyline we can expect from this volume. Okay, I would say first and foremost, this is kind of a mysterious, what the heck is happening kind of story. I love storytelling like this. I always love when I'm asking questions, especially when a world is so interesting and I'm just trying to get my bearings and figure out what is even happening here. The central mystery is really riveting, and I think that I'm really excited to continue reading this series after reading this first volume here. Essentially, the storyline picks up right as this group of people are going into a closed-off version of the future United States of America. This is a kind of near-future dystopian world where all the world is basically broken up into two central factions or empires, and the United States a while ago walled off its whole nation. It has kind of an aerial force field and physical walls that border the entire country, and it's just been on complete media blackout, complete social blackout, and no one has heard from the US in any way, shape, or form in decades and decades and decades. While all this is happening, simultaneously, there's been a pandemic that is slowly wiping out the world's population. It's something called the sky virus that, in addition to a lot of horrendous symptoms, the victims also cry blue before they die, and this is ravaging most of the world. Well, we find out that a cryptic message was released from the US, and this message included a note that said, hey, we have a cure for that virus that is plaguing the rest of the world. Just because you haven't heard from us doesn't mean that we're not watching all of you. So for the first time in ages, there's been an invitation for a select group of people to come in to America as kind of diplomats, and if they follow all the rules, they are willing to broker a deal, allegedly, to get the cure for this virus. So in comes our crew of unexpecting, unassuming, young, maybe 30s, 40s something for the most part, characters, maybe some in their 20s. And these people are from all different walks of life. Some of them are kind of military, mercenary. One of them is a journalist. One of them is a medical doctor. And all different levels of society. There's these different folks that show up. It's a small cast. I think it's like 7 or so people. And they're drawn together and they try to follow all the instructions. Well, as soon as they cross borders into America, they are immediately shot down. Their helicopter crash lands and they find themselves in kind of a dystopian wasteland. And soon they are come up upon these natives who are in these kind of crazy clothes. They're riding mutated animals and driving crazy Mad Max-like cars and devices. And one of them gets captured, and it's just pure insanity. Eventually, the rest of the group finds themselves in a bunker with the man who, at least appears to have sent the message in the first place, though he has no memory of it, and he's kind of viewed as more or less a crackpot, just wild version of Uncle Sam. And he's telling all these voyagers that they're the chosen ones from the prophecy that are going to walk the spiral throughout different regions of America. Allegedly, America has now devolved into these weird factions, and there's different portions of the nation that are walled off even of themselves into different regions, and allegedly there's prophesied people that are going to walk the spiral pattern out from the center heart of America all the way winding around to eventually find, whatever they need for the future of the nation and the world. It has a kind of yellow brick road feeling. There is a kind of quest quality to this whole thing, and there's a lot of like dystopian future fantasy elements to it. And that's basically the center plot of this. We find a like enemy faction that's controlled by this guy named the Destiny Man, whose face we never see, but he seems to be some kind of mutant himself with animal horns and just a real bad dude. It's a really fascinating world, and I think how they do the narrative is also really smart. We start right away in the chopper as they're flying into America, and then we're treated to flashbacks throughout the issues that go into how each of these members of the team get involved, get tagged for this mission. We see a couple flashbacks about like mission debriefing before they go in, things like that. And I think overall the way they frame the narrative of the story is very clear, very well done, and a great way to get to know a huge ensemble cast, one issue at a time as we get further backstory into each of the individuals. Another kind of fun little feature about each of these issues, at the end of each issue, there's a page, usually on red with white text, that has a couple excerpts of some fictional book that one of the characters allegedly writes about the history and tradition of America, that has all of these different quotations from different people around the world, either commenting on America getting sealed off, the culture of America, what's going on in the world. But they're really cool little quotations that, again, kind of further the world building. They're not always directly impacting the main narrative, at least it doesn't appear that way. But like I said, it enriches the world, and it's a nice little detail. I think overall, so far, the world feels very lived in. I think, obviously, the pandemic stuff kind of hits close to home. I'm sure I don't have to explain why. Maybe a little on the nose, but I think they don't spend a ton of time on that, which I appreciated. You're really locked into the central mystery and adventure on what is happening in America itself. The cure for the virus, as much as that's a motivating factor, it's by no means the main thrust of the central narrative, or at least it doesn't seem that way. I think at its core, it is very character-driven, and I think that's why I engaged so well with it and why I really want it to succeed. I know there's at least 3 other volumes out or coming out for this series so far, and I believe it's still an ongoing series. So I don't know if anyone's current on this book or have read farther than I have. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments of how this series is doing. But I'd say for a volume 1 trade, I was definitely hooked. I think that this is a great series for people that like dystopia, a great series for people who like bigger ensemble casts with some good character development, and I think that this is a great piece for people that like Scott Snyder and Charles Soule. Those are writers that I both enjoy. I know Scott Snyder, I've read, obviously, and reviewed a lot of his Batman run. I've done a little bit of Charles Soule, like I've read some of his Vader stuff. I read his whole run on Daredevil and quite enjoyed it. So this is a really fun little blend of those writers. I really like the overall narrative. I also compare this series a little bit to Nocterra, Scott Snyder's other kind of dystopia future book. I think they're very different, and I think overall I'm more engaged with Nocterra. I like the world it paints a little bit more at this point, but I'm still newer to Undiscovered Country, so we'll see how it pans out. I think it's really great that we have a couple ongoing dystopian future series from Scott Snyder. I think that he does a really good job at these kind of wild worlds. As much as I love his stuff for the big two, all his work with Batman and the DC, some of his indie stuff has been so much fun to read lately for me. As far as the art direction in this book from Camicoli, I think that the art was always super strong throughout the whole thing. The panel layout was pretty straightforward, but really beautifully done. There were a couple moments where the panels went across both pages, with its paneling kind of splitting in a middle box in the gutter a little bit. In the trade paperback, there wasn't a terrible amount of gutter loss, but I think that there were a couple pages where it was a bit detrimental just because we'd have some word bubbles kind of sinking in, or there'd be a little bit of details kind of lost a bit to the gutter. But beyond that, the art was just spectacular. I really loved the layout. I loved the character models. It is really nice when you have such a large ensemble core cast, when all the characters look very distinctive. There was never a point where I was like, is this guy that guy, or what have you? Everyone was so distinct and well drawn. I think the world is also such an important character in this series, and so the fact that we have such a wonderfully lush and detailed world we're treated to in this first volume, it really helps set the stage and the foundation for what I hope is a great series moving forward. And I think that that's done in no small part due to the artist, who has rendered a future version of America that is haunting and just so freaky, candidly. There were aspects of it, like I mentioned, that remind me a little bit of Mad Max even, and that's a disturbing way to see your own country. And as we reach the back end of our collection here, all I have to say is this was a promising start to a new series. And with that, let's go ahead and give this collection a grade. For a strong start to a new dystopian fantasy character-driven series from Scott Snyder, Charles Soule, and Giuseppe Camicoli, The Comic Book Report is happy to give Undiscovered Country Volume 1 Destiny a B. This is an above-average read for me and an above-average start to a series. I love a new indie series, especially to get away from the flights and tights for a bit with the big two superhero books. Those are always probably going to be my favorite, but it's so fun to spread my wings a little bit and delve deeper into what this medium can offer. For fans of a good thriller, a good mystery, and a good dystopian world, I highly recommend reading Undiscovered Country Volume 1. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. This has been The Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to like, and if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. Check out some of my other videos, and have a good one.